Hello, and thank you for tuning in for a HOPLAB Collaboration webinar. My name is Vanessa and I'm from Southpack International with the HOPLAB here. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Michelle Oberg's session. Michelle is the Safety Innovation Lead with Downey Utilities. Now, what she's been up to in the last couple of years is looking to shift from purely traditional safety methods to including a complete business approach in their strategy and direction to safety, to also incorporate concepts like human and organisational performance, safety 2, high reliability organisations and resilience engineering. Now, it's not just been about including these ideas and concepts. They very much have translated this into practice, and she'll talk about some of the methods and how they do that. And it's things like learning teams, work insights, triangulation, safety pulses and more. So if you're looking to introduce some of these safety theories into your business, it's very much this applied approach and you'll get some great insights out of this session. Now, Michelle's been really instrumental in that safety direction. And one of their key tenets that they've taken on is empowering people as the solution and also questioning those long-held assumptions that can stick around. She stays with us for Q&A, and for those who were able to join us live, there were some great questions, so I encourage you to stay on for that. And of course, if you have any follow-on questions yourself or comments or feedback, we love to hear it. And so would Michelle. So please get in contact if there's anything we can assist you with, and sit back, relax, enjoy.
In the safety division here at Downey. I suppose what makes us beneficial in that approach is that we can actually be quite flexible with what we pick and choose going forward. So we can make sure that all the safety approaches that we actually take into the workplace is suited for our business. Obviously, there's some theories out there that can be quite rigid and fixed in what they focus on. So we make sure that we choose the ones that will complement our business, get rid of the ones that don't work, and at the end of the day, continue that flexible, agile conversation. Because what worked for us yesterday may not work for us tomorrow. And that's one of the key things that we're trying to make sure that our organisation and our businesses take forward, is that adaptability, the learning mind frame and concepts going into safety in all areas of business. Okay, so there's a question about why do we even need a new approach? I'm sure you've had that question before. We've done traditional safety for years and years. For the last couple of decades, we've been focusing on critical risk, reducing or eliminating all hazards where possible. Now, there's been fantastic work in that space. We've had great learnings and we have significantly impacted the long-term outcomes from that. So we know that we need to have our harness when we're working from heights. We know that we need to make sure that we've got shoring when we're working in a trench. And the critical risks and controls that we put in place are vital for our frontline workers and keeping them safe. However, we're still seeing incidents, and that's because the world is complex and the people that we work with are immensely complex. So when it comes to solving safety, we need a different approach that's not just removing or eliminating those risks altogether. Let's face it, at the end of the day, if we removed all risk, we would all be out of the business. I was going to say everyone would stay home, but that's probably a little bit too real in a COVID-based world. But at the end of the day, we need to accept a certain level of risk in order for us to continue our operations. Now, I have here on the slide that people have stopped evolving. So we're pretty much stuck with the brain that we developed over 200,000 years ago. What's interesting about that is that humans no longer evolve or change to suit the world. We actually change the world to suit us, which is why we actually don't have that long-term evolution anymore. Why that's important is because a lot of culture initiatives or traditional safety approaches, when it comes to the people and the human, they focus on changing the individual. You can definitely change the individual, but what I would suggest is that we wouldn't actually get the most bang for our buck, because what happens when that person leaves the organisation? So it's all about that systematic change, so that it doesn't matter who comes into the organisation, as long as they have the base level of competence that we need for them to be successful in their job, we will then set them up for success long term. So they will be carried forward. So it doesn't matter if they have a bad night, if they've had a fight with their loved ones, or if they're feeling frustrated. At the end of the day, they're set up for success regardless of their own internal world. And that's something that I think that the human operational performance and also the human and organizational performance framework really embraces and takes forward. So I thought it'd be interesting to go over a little bit of what Downey Utilities have been through, especially with the timeline, because this isn't something that can happen overnight. And so this is how we've actually taken it forward and embedded that long-term change in our business. To start with, obviously this is my timeline, that's my perspective. Others in my organization might have a slightly different timeline, but this is generally the way that things flowed for us. At the beginning of January 2018, we had a fantastic GM, Campbell Warren, who actually came into the business, really inspire and spark that change. So he brought the new ideas and concepts into the business. So asking the question, what happens if we try to do safety differently? What if we make sure that people don't just go home safe, but go home better? And not only that, actually grow from their experience of work. So he set up a series of monthly thought leadership sessions where he brought in all sorts of concepts, ideas from just culture, human and organizational performance, learning teams, restorative culture, all that sort of thing into the business, and started really challenging the way that our senior leaders were thinking and inviting them to actually come to the table and think of different ways that they could engage with their frontline workers. Now, Campbell Warren has left us, unfortunately, so he's sharing his knowledge and insights with others in the industry. But I should note that he was followed on by John Walsh, who is a fantastic boss. And I'm not saying that because performance reviews are coming up, but it can be quite rare to have two bosses back to back who are fantastic. The reason why I shout out those two people is because at the end of the day, if you do not have that senior leadership support and drive, it can be very difficult to take this off the ground. Not saying that's impossible. I'm just saying that it probably requires a different approach if you're seeing that resistance at that level. So once the senior leaders were exposed to some of the new ideas, they decided to actually invest and make sure that they were supported in the business to take it forward. And that's where I came in. So I started my journey with Downer at August 2018. So over 2 years now, which is very exciting. And they brought me on board as a safety innovation lead. Now, like Vanessa said, I'm here to help proactively and collaboratively shift the organization in that safety response. I like to say I'm a professional in safety and not a safety professional, because my training and education has actually been in organizational psychology. So organizational psychology is not your normal run-the-mill psychology. I can't give you any medication. I can't tell you why your loved ones are angry at you. And I can't sort out any disputes between neighbors. But what I can do is look at the way that the workplace is set up, look at where the bottlenecks, redundancies, and issues are, and also make sure that it's actually designed for human use. So at the end of the day, it's about that systematic change to support the individual outcome. So I came onto the business to really understand how I could support and drive it forward. My very first step with the human operational performance journey was actually discovery. And this discovery for me as a focused activity took 3 months, but it's an ongoing journey. So it's very important that you know your business and know where you're trying to enact change in your business, because the different layers in a business require different considerations and insights moving forward. So for the utilities level, as an example, we've got over 3,000 people within our business all across Australia. So it was really important to understand the internal politics. Who's who in the zoo, who's going to be our greatest support, who's going to be the naysayers that we need to maybe coddle or effectively debate against, and who's just happy along to continue on with the journey. There's the external pressure. So as a utilities company, obviously we have that end user delivery that we need to make sure that people have clean water, fast internet, electricity is all set up, and the client expectations. So in the water business, as an example, as I mentioned, I'm here for a water conference. They've actually been very proactive in the field for taking things like Sage 2, Sage Differently forward into the industry as a whole, which is fantastic for us, because at the end of the day, if it's a client expectation or need, that gives us a better business case moving forward. When it comes to our business area, so within utilities, we have networks, which is our gas and electricity. We have tech and comms, which is our NBN, telco, Water North, which is all our waste water and water services in Queensland and New South Wales, Water South, which is again Victoria, ACT, all that sort of business, and Skill Tech, which is our meter readers out in the front line, making sure that we're having accurate readings of your meters that record your energy usage and your water usage. So obviously those business areas are vastly different from each other. So it's important to understand what the similarities are. So from a utilities perspective, what can we actually tackle as that greater business level, so we can combine our resources to take it forward, but also where the gaps are. So an issue in one business is not going to be an issue in another business, and any complications that arise from that. This makes sure that we're spending our time wisely, so we're having high return on investment, or we're making sure that we're tackling a burning platform that might be unique to a business area, but it actually has long-term effect for utilities as a whole. Next is programs. At the end of the day, operation is king. So safety should never be owned by your safety advisors or zero harm advisors, as the case may be in my organisation. At the end of the day, we're here to support, coach and facilitate those conversations, skill set, and also help achieve operational outcomes in a safe, effective way. Safety is not owned by us at the end of the day. It is an outcome of operations. So if operations are not involved and not brought into the conversation, you're going to be dead in the water. Because at the end of the day, if they do not see value in it, they might smile and nod at you to your face, but behind the scenes, that it's not going to carry forward. And then you have the individual sites. So this is on the ground, you're getting your boots on, hard hat, you're getting dirty, and this is where you really want to see that change take place. It's important to understand how that's set up, because you can understand then what their workload is, their time pressure and things like that. The last thing we want to do is create change fatigue, which is where you're trying to do so many things that people just disconnect because it's too much. At the end of the day, we need to really understand what is our business as usual so that we can support business while improving without creating undue stress. So something I say to our businesses is that if we are going to try something new, add something to the role, or even take it away, we need to make sure they're supported. So we're not just adding something without taking another activity away from them. So from there, we're still in 2018. It's all about creating that curiosity. So it's communicating the business value. Now, this is important that it's not just the safety case. Now, like many people on the line, I am an absolute safety nerd. That's where my focus and passion has been. If you tell me that this is going to keep our people safe or better, I'm all for it. Unfortunately, while we say safety is our #1 priority, that's not the case. At the end of the day, if we cannot keep the lights on, it doesn't matter how safe we are. So production pressure will always overtake safety pressure. But at the end of the day, if we are trying to make a proactive change to safety, we'll see that change in other areas of work. So not only will we be helping our people be safer, we should actually be improving productivity, turnover, profit, that sort of thing. We want to make sure that we're communicating to the business that, yes, this is a new area and you can be pioneers in what you're trying to achieve and take forward, while still communicating the fact that they're not going to be alone in the wilderness. A lot of organizations like to be seen as innovators or thought leaders in whatever industry they may be, but a lot of them are scared to take that first step. Now, my claim to fame is the Woolworths experiment, where I was the lead researcher under Sydney Decker and Drew Ray. So we knew that there's already been research conducted prior to our organisation looking at it. We extended the Woolworths project in our Logan partnership, where we actually took that decluttering process further. It was fantastic for us that Woolworths had happened, so there was a baseline of information and insight. So they weren't alone in the wilderness, but there's obviously still so much to explore in this space that they were thought leaders. And at the end of the day, when you're trying something new, it's always a good practice to get as many runs on the board as possible, as quickly as possible. So this is your burning platforms and quick wins. The faster that you can communicate value to business, the faster there's going to be uptake long term. So you've got the curiosity base. People are starting to question about how they've approached safety in the past, or even business operations in the past. What next? Well, it's all about that brand. So originally, within Downer, we actually called our program Enabling Safety. So it was all about how can we enable our people to be safe in their workplace. So this was in addition to zero harm. So not only do we not want to cause harm to our people, but we want to enable them as well. And as we're exploring the new ideas in that curiosity space, things like that, human and organizational performance learning teams, all that sort of thing, it became apparent very quickly that it wasn't just a safety solution. It's a whole of business solution. Because at the end of the day, if we improve work, it's not just going to improve safety outcomes, it's going to improve outcomes as a whole. So we actually had a slight shift in our branding to human and operational performance. Now, it tends to take 5 to 7 times for people to hear the same message in order to really encode it. So not only do you need to repeat the message 5 to 7 times for them to understand what you're saying, you still need to further communicate that to actually bring them along the journey and for them to embrace what you're trying to achieve. So on the screen is capture of all the different workshops that I've put together since 2018. It's quite interesting. This is in chronological order, so you can definitely see the evolution that I've experienced in my PowerPoint skills. But the main message I'm trying to say is that you need to repeat the message, and repeat the message. So all these slide packs were really focusing in on the benefits of human operational performance, what we can achieve and how we're going to take it forward. We looked at it both from a more general philosophical level about what this means for different business operation, and we also targeted it at specific business opportunities that we can have a direct practical implementation about what we were doing. But as you can see, it's all about repeating that message. So I'm not going to count how many are up there, but there's been quite a few in the last 2 years. I'm sure my boss is thinking that I'm just trying to validate my role by updating the slide packs. But it's really important that we're engaging with our people, and even if it's the same content, communicating it in different ways, because different messaging can help the embedding of the core concepts you're trying to communicate. Okay, so we've hit 2019. Identifying the early adopters is critical within your business. So these are the guys that are actually quite keen to take it forward and they're wanting to do something different in their businesses. Why this is important is because while you might have a great understanding about what you're trying to do, such as learning teams, you need to really make sure that it's fit for purpose. And the best way to make sure it's fit for purpose is to actually co-design it with the frontline operational crews. Because at the end of the day, if they don't see value in it, or if they do not get benefit from it, it's not worth their time or your time. Because when it comes to safety, I believe we're a service industry. We're here to serve people. So if we're not being effective in our service, that's something to improve on. The next stage, which is really, again, the 2018-2019 time set, is try. And you're going to fail, and you need to try again. Sometimes when it comes to a new way of approach, it can be very easy to stop at the first sign of resistance or failure long term, right? So it's really important that you have that conversation on the outset. What are we going to do if or when an incident occurs? That can either be a high potential or something as simple as a hand injury. It really needs to have that communication up front, because you don't want to get 2-3 months or at this point a year down the track and be surprised by an incident and people blame your program. At the end of the day, we know that incidents occur. Should probably put a caveat here. I believe zero harm is an aspirational goal and no one ever deserves to be hurt going to work and to provide for their family. However, I feel like it's very difficult for zero harm to be achieved practically. While we can never prevent incidents from occurring, what we can do is reduce the consequences of those incidents. So when we're talking about try, fail, try again, it's being clear about what failure can look like. So we're not just blaming the program when it could be a once-off incident, but also making sure that we are approaching this with an evidence-based methodology. At the end of the day, we do not want to add more things to our already cluttered safety system without strong evidence or support for what we're trying to do. And this is where that small micro-experiment approach comes into it. So it's making sure that you've got that contained local level, you can see what's going to change, you can see the impacts, and if something does go wrong, you can manage that risk as well. So I've got a few lessons on this particular slide. So when I say try, fail, try again, it can be something as simple as naming. So the first point I have is appreciative investigations. So appreciative investigations, appreciative inquiries, and known tool within our industry. When we tried to introduce it within Downer, our frontline operations hated it. The reason why they hated it, it had investigations in the title. When we rebranded and listened to their feedback, we actually changed it to work insights, and that's actually been taken up from the front line, and they see it as a really valuable tool to understand work is done. So something as simple as naming can set you back. We have top down versus bottom up. We originally wanted to approach this as a whole of utilities activity, so coming from the senior leaders down to our front line. Because our business is so varied, it was really hard to have that consistent penetration. So rather than wait for everyone to get on the bus or everyone to be at the same stage, it was then that bottom-up approach. This meant that we can actually develop our tools as we go along for those early adopters, and that the other areas of the business who might be more risk adverse were able to see the benefits of what we're doing. We have compliance versus empowering. So we're actually the third largest employer in Australia after Woolworths and Coles. The reason why that's important is because within a large company, we have a lot of bureaucracy that we need to manage. And at the end of the day, we do have to abide by the Downer Group systems and standards. This is not a barrier long term. It's really understanding your business, like I said in an earlier slide. It's understanding where your boundaries are and playing in those, in the space within it. So Art of Work really introduced this concept about freedom in a framework. Where's your framework? Where are the hard borders for you within your organization? So for example, zero harm is still in our title, regardless of my own personal beliefs. That's a hard border for us, but that doesn't mean that we can't actually build on the definition of zero harm for us as a business, as I've spoken about before. So it's that freedom within a framework that's really important to drive forward. The other thing with this compliance versus empowering is that I believe at the end of the day, you should always start with the human, because a lot of times when you start at that perspective, you can actually hit a lot of the compliance activities that you need to do in your business. But if you have missed them by focusing on the human, you can always add them on top. Whereas when you focus on compliance as your first starting point, it's really hard then to actually shift it back to the human focus. And as I said before, micro experiments, have that local contained change so you can actually see what works and what doesn't. Knowing what doesn't work is just as valuable as knowing what does work. Okay, so we've done all our discovery. We understand our business, the internal politics, what our clients are expecting. We have our early adopters. We've been starting to create the initiatives behind the scenes. We're now in 2020, as I'm sure most of you would understand. This was not a year that we had planned. However, it's also means that we can really road test our tools, because at the end of the day, if it's not going to withstand a pandemic, it's probably not valuable long term. So we made sure that we have an integrated HOP toolkit. So this is both for marketing, local capability that not only is it reliant on me to do the work, but there's others in the business who can do the exact same thing that I do, and making sure that we can actually monitor the changes that occur. I'm sure we've all heard that old saying, what gets measured gets managed. Well, it can be a bit on the nose. It's also very important because a lot of times our senior leaders look at numbers, and especially with an engineering heavy organization, it's really important that we can give them the language that they can understand. It's not enough to say that people feel good. We actually have to have the measures and stats to back us up. So we've done a lot of the space in the last 2 years has been really trialing what we're doing and muddling our way through. Where we are at the moment as a business is that we've actually road tested a lot of the things that we're trying to do. And so we're ready to do a large scale change program focused on human and operational performance. For me, this is very exciting. The last change program I was really centered on was the Woolworths experiment, which changed the landscape for safety in Australia. I believe that what we're trying to do within Downey Utilities is going to do the exact same thing that Woolworths did. So at the end of the day, we have great tools within the industry that we've all been using, such as learning teams. But it's more than that. It's making sure that we have that systematic change where we're changing the way that we work to move forward into the future. Okay, I'm going to finish off with a rundown of our toolkit, because at the end of the day, that's great. That's our safety journey so far for the last 2 years. I've hopefully justified my position, but I really just wanted to flag the ideas and concepts that have really taken root within our organisation. As I've said, we've had many different initiatives or ideas trialled over the last 2 years, and the ones that I'm going to run through now are the ones that we've seen that direct operational and safety value. I do want to just note that when it comes to our human and operational performance, we don't just measure safety, because at the end of the day, safety is just an outcome of work. We want to make sure that our work areas improve. And the other insight that I want to offer people as well is where you are actually focusing in your organisation. So you can justify this, you can understand this in 3 different ways. You have that human factor. So a lot of behavioural safety programs try to focus on this. Improving attitudes, tapping into hearts and minds. Why are you going? Why are you being safe? Who are you going home to? That sort of thing. Then we have our work factors. So this is what influences us day to day at our jobs. That's our workload, how much planning we have, the resources we have available to us. The third one to understand is our organisational factor. So this is where we don't have direct influence over. However, it has a massive impact on our business. When it comes to human operational performance and the tactics that we're taking forward, it's been really vital for us to focus on that work factor. At the end of the day, you can focus on the human, but what happens when they leave? You have to start that conversation all over again. At the organisational factor, as I said, the largest employer in Australia, it's a slow-moving beast. It's going to take a lot of time, effort, and energy to make that change. Whereas with the work factor, we can make immediate change tomorrow, while impacting our people and setting them up for success long term. So our toolkits, finally. Very first one, obviously this is something that Southpack does in their training, is learning teams. So we use learning teams for both our incident investigations and also proactive business improvement. We really wanting to understand what normal work looks like, and also the variations and the variability. One of the things we've actually added to the learning team process that we found very valuable is process mapping. So actually outlining the steps involved, because that can help us identify where our critical components of the system are, and also where we can improve efficiency long term. We do collect feedback regarding learning teams from the sessions themselves, and it's been overwhelmingly positive from the guys on the front line, to the point where they actually look forward to being involved in a learning team. Not so much in ICAM, as I'm sure you can understand. We have enabling human performance workshops. So this is really communicating that baseline knowledge or foundations to our frontline workers. This is really important because this goes back to that brand conversation. They need to know what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. In this particular case, again, we've had fantastic response and feedback for it. And when you have that motivation and momentum from the front line, it's very hard then for leaders to ignore what you're trying to achieve. Work insights, as I said, is our appreciative investigations or inquiry. Again, that's mapping what happens in the real world without expectation or that top-down processing of this is what the procedure says. Micro experiments. So one of a great micro experiment that we had in 2019 was from our Utilita business. So Utilita has really paved the way for us. They were one of our early adopters in this space. And they really embraced some of the core concepts and ideas, and they still do to this day. So one of the things that they looked at was how we were starting our work operations. So was it pre-start conversations? Was it risk assessments? Was it permits? All that sort of thing. And so they actually trialled what was the best approach for making people aware about the risks on site and allowing that safety awareness for our operational crews. At the end of the day, conversations won throughout, because a lot of the times paperwork is trying to facilitate a conversation, but paperwork can actually become an activity in itself rather than a support tool for the activity you're trying to drive. If you want more information about that, I'm more than happy to share with you our results in that space. Triangulation is all about trying to figure out what's happening in the business for complex issues. So within our space, we're doing a lot of operating and maintenance activities. We see the same incidents occurring, but not in the same context or scenario. So it's important to take it from that higher level triangulation approach so you can see what are the systematic challenges that are impacting the business overall. So a couple of the initiatives we've done in the triangulation space is all about protecting the assets in the ground and working near unexpected electricity for our water business. Again, if you want detail on that, let me know. I can definitely provide that. Decluttering. So our Logan business is really taking this forward in that operational context. We've had fantastic results, both for savings to the operation upwards of $1 million, productivity, communication, planning long-term. When it comes to decluttering, it's about understanding what is in the system and if it's actually supporting work or taking away from work. Safety Climate Pulse is a monthly pulse that we send out to our frontline workers to see how they're going. So we ask questions around leadership, our people, so our teamwork, our practices, and our engagement. At the end of the day, if your people are not engaged, it doesn't matter how great your idea is, it's always going to be dead in the water. We also ask them what helped them in their work that month and what hindered them in their work that month. Obviously, this is just one form of data collection, but what we try to make different about this is that there's an interactive live dashboard that our local leaders can tap into. So unlike other engagement surveys where it can take up to 6 months to get results, this populates automatically and the local leaders own that data so they can make changes tomorrow. They don't have to wait for the directives or insights from the senior leadership team to improve their business. So, gone a little bit over my speaking time, but I want to open it up to everybody for questions, comments, violent objections when it comes to our human and operational performance journey at Downey Utilities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. It's really wonderful to hear what you guys have been up to. There's certainly been a lot of setup over the last couple of years to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success to go much more large scale. So it's been very cool to hear that journey. We have a couple of questions just to kick off. We have one about risk assessment. So thank you for sharing with us. Is Downer doing differently for risk assessment? And do you use risk matrix in the SWIMS and why?
Yeah, so great question. I think what's important when we're talking about different safety approaches, such as HOP or Safety 2 or Safety Differently, New View, whatever you want to call it, is that it's not replacing traditional means of safety management. So we definitely still do risk assessment, we definitely still have our matrix, and we definitely have our SWIMS involved. What we see as an addition or benefit for what we're trying to do is that we can improve those traditional approaches by making sure that it's serving the human. At the end of the day, one of the things that I challenge my leaders with is who's that form or outcome, who's that for? Is it for the frontline workers or is it for someone in the office to make them feel safe? Is it so that the management team feels like they're managing safety and they have control about what's happening rather than really knowing what's going on for themselves? So in a lot of organizations, when it comes to those risk assessments, it's already part of a workshop that they take forward. But rather than focus, I suppose, specifically on the risks or hazards, what I try to do is actually look at normal work. Because at the end of the day, something may be a low risk, but if you're having multiple distractions where your phone's ringing off the hook, you've got members of the public interrupting you every 5 seconds, that risk profile is looking vastly different from what it looks like when you're in a nice contained office outside of the world.
Awesome, thank you. We have the next question. What has changed when the new safety comes to workers who are working on the ground? So I guess, what are the workers on the ground seeing change?
Yeah, and that's really the litmus test, right? Is how do the frontline workers feel and appreciate, or not appreciate, engage with us? Because at the end of the day, this can very easily turn into a trend or a fad. you send your leaders to a conference and they come back with a brand new idea. You just have to wait them out for 3 months and they'll have another idea. But what we've actually seen is an increase in communication and feedback. So people are more likely to offer their own insights, which is vital for our success. They feel more engaged and satisfied in their work because they have that growth opportunity. And we're able to really understand where those work pressures are coming in. So we can reduce pressure for non-vital tasks, so they have more cognitive capacity and time to focus on the tasks that are vital for us. So we still have incidents. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but the way that we manage those incidents and the way that the people offer the information about those incidents are very different. Rather than being quite defensive or trying to avoid blame, they come into the room to be very collaborative and cooperative, so we can actually truly learn from what's happening, so we can make long-term change and benefits.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question from Bryce. He says, hi Michelle, what is the incident threshold for you starting a learning team?
There is, so a lot of the times for us, we have a category 3 is what was required for an ICAM. So that's when it's notifiable to the client, is when we have an ICAM traditional investigation. When it comes to learning teams, you can just do it for whatever to get that greater insight to what your business is doing. In saying that, we've done in the past a combination of both ICAM and learning teams, and we found that the ICAM answers what happened specifically on that day, what was the setup, all the environmental factors, and the learning team really goes to that systematic factor. We have had over-focus, I believe, on incidents for learning team, but what we're really trying to push the business is to go into more of that collaborative learning space where we can actually just learn from normal work. So nothing exciting happened that day, but it's an opportunity to improve business processes. I suppose one of the things I will mention is that learning teams is not a catch-all. So in an area of our business, we're having a high rate of hand injuries, as an example. Now, hand injuries, our guys work on the tools day in, day out for hours at a time. You can't really do a learning team on that because that's such a broad, dispersed topic that you can't center it down to a single focus. So in that instance, we actually did work insights. And once we had the information and discovery from work insights, we could then do a learning team on top of that. So it does depend on what your focus is and the question you're trying to answer. If you have a specific area or topic you're trying to explore, you can go straight to learning teams. If it's more nuanced or complex, you can either go to triangulation or work insights.
Awesome. Yeah. Question from Cindy. And I'll fuse the two questions together. She's asking around any advice for a small HSE team. So obviously Downer is quite large, so she's curious how many people are in the team, but also, yeah, what advice you might have for small and mid-scale business.
Yeah, great question. So while Downer is quite large, it's me, myself, and I running HOP within Utilities, obviously with great support from my boss, John Walsh. Again, shout out to the amazing John Walsh. So this is where it's really important that you get the operations on board. So when you can communicate that value, they will actually be putting their hands up and begging and asking for this. So when it comes to learning teams, again, a lot of our leaders had an introductory course with Southpack. We had Art of Work help us frame up how we were actually doing it internally, and we've since then taken it leaps and bounds forward. We started with our safety team as in being facilitators, but we've had other people in the business who are project managers, project engineers, HR, become learning team facilitators as well. So at the end of the day, you're there to influence and facilitate, and it's really identifying what gets your business geared up or excited, because once you can tap into that, you can shift all your messaging around that particular topic. So if there's an issue they're really concerned about, or if they really want client engagement, it's really figuring out what that need is to fit the message to that, rather than push your message onto them when they're already full thinking about their normal business activities.
Awesome, Michelle. Do you have any tips on facilitators, learning team facilitators or work insight facilitators? So you mentioned it's diversified a little bit across the business. What kind of things would you look out for?
So one of the key learnings that we had at the beginning was that we were being a bit too broad with our focus, and so the solutions that we were unpacking towards the end of the session were really general. So it's like better communication or better planning. They're way too broad to actually offer value. All organisations know that if they have better planning, better communication, flashy equipment, they're going to have great outcomes. But a lot of times they're trying to pick and choose where they spend the money on their investment from. So it's being very clear about what you're trying to target or understand. So when you think about an incident learning team, you can really frame it around that incident while knowing that you're going to tap into systematic issues, and that's important, but making sure that you're really crafting that message. So when we come to the solutions, I always say to our guys, you need to, first of all, imagine what you're going to do. So if you come up with an idea that you cannot see yourself doing in the front line, then it might be a great idea, but maybe not right now. Because at the end of the day, if you can't see yourself doing it, we're here to improve your work. So we should focus on something else. And I also get them to be very specific. So when they say better communication, I say, no, not good enough. What do you mean? Do you want more emails? I say most of the time they say no. It's like, so you actually want to have more updated business information so you can make better decisions on the front line. So you know where the work pressure, time pressure is coming from, if it's real or imagined. That's a very different question to just better communication, because that then comes into transparency, speed of information, and how much information is shared within the different levels of the business. So being specific and focused and point driven is very important, and also making sure that the solutions are targeted at that front line. Because while we communicate up, all the larger systematic issues such as our procurement or our systems, and we do definitely influence that, we want to make sure that something that we can take forward is in our sphere of control, so we can actually do something about it rather than wait for someone else to take charge. Because when we wait for someone else to take charge, momentum goes out the window, and that's one of the killers of learning teams for long-term solutions and embedding of those solutions is the drop in momentum.
Yeah, right, got you. Yeah, so what I'm really hearing from that is it really needs to be specific and relevant to the front line, or, you know, taking these generalist comments and then looking at what does that actually look like practically at different levels. Cool. We have a bunch more questions. I am aware of the time, and we did sort of put this as a 45-minute, but Michelle, if you're happy to keep
yeah, I'm happy to keep going.
But for those who need to go, thank you for joining us, and we'll keep going with the questions for now. Is there advice on things we would not do if we had to do it over? So lessons learned.
We spent a lot of time trying to get everyone on the bus, which took a lot of wind out of our sails. So it's not about the passive people who are happy to plod along or ignore you to the point where you become too annoying to ignore. It was about that violent dissension in the business, because obviously for a lot of traditional safety people or even traditional business people where they have the command control, I'm the leader, you're my subordinate, and I use that word purposely, this can be quite challenging for them because you're about empowering people. One of my favorite quotes is from Steve Jobs, who say that, you know, we recruit capable, competent people and then tell them what to do. And that's really what we're trying to shift with this approach. So we spent a lot of time trying to bring these people along the journey with us, where we should have really acknowledged their concerns, and if they had important criticisms, that we would adapt to those criticisms. But if it was just saying no for the sake of it, it's more of them, you know, happy for them to live their lives in a way, and we'll just show them the proof in the pudding long term for our early adopters. So we spent a little bit too much time trying to get everybody on board at the same rate, whereas different business areas, different risk appetites are different. and really just tailoring our response to that. The other takeaway that I would have is getting baseline data. So what's really interesting about this space, especially focused on human empowerment, is that you'll have great success, and then with hindsight people go, well, of course that would happen, of course if you trusted our people, of course if you enabled them you're going to get this outcome. But so a lot of times it's taken a lot of preparation for them to even try something new. So having that baseline data set so you can actually show the shift will actually strengthen your argument and strengthen the case studies that you're trying to put back to the business. So they can't just say, oh, we knew that already. It's like, well, you didn't, or it took a lot of convincing for you to get to that point, and really having the evidence about what you're doing.
Yeah, awesome. Great advice. Thanks, Michelle. We've got a couple of questions around subcontractors. So how has this approach translated or been successful to those outside of Downer that are directly employed by the workforce, independent contractors, and do you kind of include them in things like learning teams and
100%. So for a few of our areas within utilities, we have like nearly solely subcontractor workforce. I suppose a starting point for that is that we don't actually call our subcontractors subcontractors. We actually call them either our construction partners or delivery partners. At the end of the day, we cannot do our job without them. So they are definitely our partners in our work. I know that might seem as a nitpicky or small change, but what we're really communicating is that we want to help them and support them in their own journey, because if they do not succeed as a small business, we do not succeed ourselves as utilities. So it's not about inundating our subcontractors or trying to rip them off per se. It's about actually really supporting them so they're growing with us. For any learning team that we've had that has a subcontractor element, they've definitely been in the room for it. And again, we've had fantastic response from our delivery partners about their inclusion and the opportunity to help craft solutions. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work for them, it won't work for us. When it comes to the safety pulse, as an example, we have focused internally. That was both for a trial perspective to make sure that we were getting what we wanted out of it, but we're now actually expanding it out to our delivery partners, because this isn't about saying if their leadership is good or not. It's about where we can help coach, support, facilitate their growth. So for Logan Water Infrastructure, as an example, we've got a condition in our contract that we greatly support, that we try to employ from the local community. So we're actually building community capability. So it's making sure that we're actually supporting them. So as we grow, they grow with us.
Thanks everyone for making the time to tune in with Michelle in this HOPLAB collaboration. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Michelle for sharing all these insights in the journey with Downey Utilities so far. And of course the Downey Utilities for the opportunity to learn from what you guys are up to. And it's really been a true joy hearing about it, and hopefully it helps others. Now, of course, as I said, we love to hear what you think. So if you have feedback, comments or questions, please feel free to post below. That's it for now. Thanks. Bye.